So thank you, Owen, for beginning the introductions to John, Martha, and myself, sorry, and Matan. So we make up the fellowship coordination team. I am programs assistant at the Balfour project, and I first got involved because I was a fellow in 2020 to 2021, and off the back of that, I kind of really loved my experience and applied for a new position that they had in the charity to work alongside Matan and John in assisting with the coordination of the fellowship. John mentioned himself that he is a trustee of the Balfour project, and Matan's main role is to the fellowship coordinator, so he's kind of in charge of the whole process, but we work together as a team to coordinate. I'm going to share my screen now with you. Give me one moment. So hopefully everybody can see this. It should load. Okay. So John is going to give us a bit of a brief overview of the Balfour project generally as a charity, and also leading into what the fellowship does.
Thank you very much, Martha, and thank you all for coming today. The Balfour project's name probably requires some explanation. It began in about 2010 when some people who were largely based in and around Edinburgh got together and thought, how is the 100th anniversary going to be marked in 2017? And they were concerned that it didn't just become a kind of jamboree celebrating the existence of, what led to the state of Israel, but also adequately recognized what the Balfour Declaration had meant for the Palestinians, and how the whole process of history since then has led to the very difficult situation that we have in the Middle East today. One of the most important things the Balfour Project is concerned with is Britain's historic responsibility. And therefore, we are very keen on the history being taught well, the history being understood. Because when you have a situation like what you have today, you cannot unravel it unless you understand how we've got to where we are. So if I can just read this little syllogism, as I call it, it's almost a syllogism, though not quite. There is no peace without justice. There is no justice without understanding the causes of injustice. The causes of injustice cannot be remedied unless they are understood, and they can only be understood by someone who has got to grips with the history. So we call on Britain to acknowledge the Balfour Declaration and its impact on the Palestinians, as well as on what the issue of what is now the state of Israel. And what we do is we campaign, we advocate, or rather, we are not a campaigning organization quite, because we are a charity, but we do a lot of advocacy work, including campaigning in pursuit of our objectives. And our objectives include persuading the British government to recognize the state of Palestine, equal rights for all Israelis and Palestinians, and recognizing Britain's historic responsibility and how Britain ought to be doing much, much more than it is, rather than sweeping matters under the carpet when there are, shall we say, inconvenient truths. We often get asked if we could change our name. We've decided not to, because we are now known as the Balfour Project, but we do appreciate the sensitivity associated with the name Balfour. But we feel that as it is part of British history, it is right for us to recognise the existence of Mr. Balfour and what he did, and to focus on how that legacy ought to be tackled today, the negative and the positive aspects together. I think I'll stop there because you probably know the kind of things the Balfour Project does. We run regular webinars. We try and have an annual conference. We did one on Britain's abandonment of Palestine in 1948 in May. The year before that, we looked at Israel and Palestine in search of international law. And we had high-level speakers, including Baroness Hale, the former president of the Supreme Court, known as the lady with the dragonfly brooch, who told Boris Johnson his prorogation of Parliament was illegal. And we also had Philippe Sands, a name probably known to a lot of you, and someone who Ian and I know very well and have known him for many decades, and Dominic Grieve, as well as Israeli and Palestinian speakers. But I will stop there, and because we don't have much time. So back to you, Martha.
Thank you, John. That's brilliant. I think we're now going to actually move to Matan, who's going to tell us a bit more now about the fellowship program.
Okay, can you hear me, everyone? Great. So I'll be speaking about why we started the fellowship program. Okay, so first of all, we wanted to create a kind of younger generation of British peace advocates who can continue. We all know that Israel and Palestine in the past was taking a lot more public attention than it is today, unfortunately. And as our charity, our aim is to continue the conversation and change the international community's role. So we speak about Britain, but we collaborate a lot with Europe as well as to what we can do from outside. For example, recognition of the state of Palestine, hold Israel accountable for its actions, as well as putting pressure on our government. So there is pressure on Israel. That's why we started the fellowship program. We decided to work in universities because this is the place where the debate is happening, and this is the place where advocates and leaders of this issue, gain their training and knowledge mostly. Unlike other fellowship who kind of do the first, learn about the different narratives, mostly with undergrads or even younger students, we have decided to work with postgraduate students, also opening for last year undergraduates, because we don't want to be that, we want to leave it open for brilliant and creative and smart students to apply, because we wanted to do the next phase. So most of our fellows have learned and know a lot already. And many of them have already done internships on the ground, like in Israel, Palestine, sometimes one of the neighboring countries. So they come already with a lot of knowledge and experience. And I wrote whether it's a fellowship or an internship. Well, it's a fellowship because we do training, and we're going to speak about our training, both knowledge and skills based. But we also expect and work with our fellows to plan and build and launch their projects on different themes. You're going to hear about some of the projects today, and it's very time consuming. So it's something that we're letting the students know, and it's good that everyone knows that if someone is working and studying, then probably they will not have time, because it's not only coming to the trainings once every other week, but there's quite a lot, especially further during the academic year, to actually work on the project. So it's time consuming, but at the same time, it's for some of them, it's first time or not first time experience in project management, campaigning, etc.
Thank you, Matan. That's great. And an additional thing to mention is that, as Matan said, it is, does take quite a bit of the students' time, but they are paid a £700 stipend in return for the kind of work that they do. So there is also some financial benefit to the project too. So hopefully you can see the lovely faces of our 2021-2022 fellows. We had 12 fellows for this cohort. Interestingly, had more women this time, but I don't know if there was a particular reason why. So I can tell you a bit more about our fellows, 12 fellows, as I mentioned. This year, we had 10 postgraduates, 1 final year undergraduate, and 1 trainee teacher. So quite a heavy kind of leaning towards the postgraduate students. I think that's mainly because they have slightly more time than a final year undergrad who's normally reaching the end of their tether with all of their workload. And again, this year with our recruitment, we're reaching out to both postgrads and undergrads, but we imagine we'll have a similar kind of split with the cohort this year. They studied a whole range of different subjects, which we're really pleased about. We have people studying international law, human rights law, international politics, history, theology, Islamic arts and architecture, I think also Arabic, maybe. So that's fantastic for us because that means they're coming from different disciplines, but all with the same passion and interest in campaigning for peace and justice and equal rights in Israel and Palestine. But their academic backgrounds and the diversity of those backgrounds means that they ended up doing some really interesting projects, which we will talk a little bit more about in a minute. And as you can see, they studied at a whole range of different UK universities. We're very keen to try and make this fellowship one that is accessible for all and that isn't London centric. We know that quite a lot of internships or fellowship programs are, so hopefully this is something where we can recruit widely. And so, as Matan mentioned, we offer our fellows a training program, and that's kind of the main chunk of what we kind of bring to the fellowship program. And the training program is kind of made up of a mix of skills-based workshops and knowledge-based workshops. We felt that this was important because all of the fellows are going to continue on into the world of work afterwards. And so we hope that they would be able to be equipped with some very useful skills alongside kind of more content and understanding of the situation in Israel and Palestine. You can see some pictures here from some of the things that we've done on our training program. It includes a public speaking workshop, which is always very popular. The fellows get a great opportunity to be put under the spotlight and to argue their perspective and their points, and they get kind of tips on how to improve their command of a room. We also have run a introduction to how to film a campaign. So the fellows are filmed and again put their public speaking skills into practice. But then in terms of knowledge-based workshops, we have ones run by John and Matan. John runs a fantastic workshop on international law, and that happens at the beginning of the fellowship program. So it gives them a good kind of introduction to one of the key themes. But then we have other knowledge-based workshops. We've had interfaith-based ones before, ones on comparisons with Northern Ireland, and if we can compare the Israel-Palestine situation with the Northern Irish one. So Matan, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, whenever you finish, I just wanted to say that some of the videos that we are launching now for recruitment are from that filming day, so you can have a look at them on our website, YouTube channel, etc. But also, I think it's important to mention that we are doing the workshops, most of them online, because many are in many parts of the UK. But we do have in the autumn or winter semester a retreat, a whole weekend retreat in which we meet in Oxfordshire and also plan and work on the project. So really have time for that and to connect with each other. And the in-workshops day, which is during the spring semester.
Thank you. And as Matan said, leading on perfectly to talk about the projects now. You can see a photo here on this slide of the in-person retreat that we had, but this was really the beginning stages of fellows thinking about their projects and working out who they would work with, and starting to brainstorm what they went on to do. So I think we'll move on to talk about the projects now, Matan.
Yeah, and actually we are glad to have with us Amber Khan, who was a fellow this year from Manchester University. Amber, are you here?
Yes, hello.
Hey, so Amber will now speak about her experience and also her project.
I just want to say a massive thank you to Matan, John and Martha for the opportunity. It was an amazing year and I think that I learned a lot. I'll divide it into obviously the workshop and the training programs, and then I'll move on to speak about our project. And also you'll have to forgive me, I'm on my phone, so I'm a little bit all over the place. But the training programs were really, really useful in being able to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. I mean, everybody knows it's a really contentious topic. And I think it was immensely useful to have the sessions to be able to discuss how do you approach talking about Israel-Palestine, but I think more importantly, how do you become an effective advocate for the Israel-Palestine conflict? I think prior to joining the fellowship program, my politics was very much student politics. It was very much, you know, who can shout the loudest, who can be the most passionate. And I think going through the training program demonstrated that that's not the most effective way to discuss the Israel-Palestine conflict. And actually it was about being an effective advocate rather than the loudest advocate in the room. I also think that the sessions that were offered were like very, very holistic as well. So it was really covering all bases on how to be an effective advocate, from the public speaking to John's excellent international law session, where we can really get into the kind of legal position, but also how do you get that message across? So it's all well and good having all the knowledge. It's all well and good being able to talk about the complexities of the conflict. But I think something that I realized through the program as well is if you can't translate that into layman's terms, then you might as well be speaking to a brick wall. A lot of people are often reluctant to talk about Israel-Palestine. So I think that it was really, really useful for me in being able to engage people who might shy away from talking about it for fear of saying the wrong thing, or perhaps will deflect with, you know, I don't know enough about the situation, or, you know, there's lots of things happening in other places, so, you know, we should talk about everything else. And I think that for me personally, it's been much easier to start a dialogue about Israel-Palestine, but it's also been really, really good in learning how to be an effective advocate and learning the processes of international law in practice. One of my favorite sessions was the comparison with Ireland and listening to obviously what happened in Ireland and how people responded to the conflict there. And I think it really opened my eyes to, you know, conflict can happen anywhere in the world, but largely it results in the same issues presenting, but in different ways. And I think that it really, again, opened my eyes to there are models and there are solutions that perhaps can be looked into and can be explored, and there are models elsewhere in the world. And then in relation to our project, so myself, Archie and Cecilia were focusing on cultural heritage. And the reason that we chose cultural heritage is because, you know, when we were discussing the conflict, if international law was going to solve Israel-Palestine, we wondered perhaps it would have solved it by now. I think it's been 70 years. So we thought maybe an interesting way to approach the conflict was through culture and heritage, which is something that obviously everybody has a link to, everyone's connected to. It's an easy, I think, cornerstone of discussion because everyone has a piece of culture or everyone has a piece of heritage that they can relate to. And we thought if we can achieve parity in the protection of cultural heritage in Palestine, in the same way that Israeli cultural heritage is protected through the museums, et cetera, then perhaps that can be like a backdoor way into discussing the conflict. And if you can reach consensus on something like cultural heritage, which in the grand scheme of a conflict we appreciate isn't the most important thing, but it seems like an important way to bring people around the table to achieve some small area of consensus, which then perhaps could lead to large areas of consensus. So that was the
You're in a meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Sorry, that's my brother.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm just gonna leave now. Sorry.
So that was the reason that we chose cultural heritage, and I took the lead on Palestinian architecture, and actually being able to liaise with these Palestinian scholars on their areas of research was a really, really great experience. And you could see how the conflict has really affected every area of life. So one of the speakers was talking about how architecture was used as a tool of resistance during the mandate period to now. And I think that it's really important when we're sharing stories of the conflict, that it really does affect every single area of your life. It's not just the day-to-day, oh, we're being shelled, we're being bombed, but even the spaces that we live, like, well, not we, but the spaces that the Palestinian people live in are being used as a way to try and counter the conflict that they face in their everyday lives. So I thought it was important to highlight, how deeply it affects the Palestinian people. So ours was more from maybe a human perspective rather than a legal one, but I think it was well worthwhile and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Amber. That's fantastic. It's really lovely to see you, first of all, and then to also have your contributions. And we're delighted that you feel that you benefited from the fellowship. And to add to what Amber said about their project, she also had Archie and Cecilia in their group, and Archie is planning, and Cecilia, but Archie's planning to do a webinar on archaeology, I think that's correct, and its relation to their project. And Cecilia's webinar is coming up on food, which is always a contentious issue. So you can keep an eye on the events that we have coming up, because they will be coming, and you can also watch Amber's webinar that she held on YouTube, which I highly encourage you to do. So thank you, Amber, so much.
Thank you very much, Amber. Lovely to see you and hear from you and about your experience. Cheers. Okay, I will try to be short in speaking about the next project. We had two students working on live literature, Palestine and Israel, which is like a live literature reading of short stories, which is already built but will run in the next academic year in Cambridge, where both of them will be based. We have another one, opportunities for encounter. So two fellows who are coming from Christian background, speaking about like Christian tours and pilgrimages, and basically informing how some of those tours basically, I quote, you go to Bethlehem and not even know that you're in occupied Palestine, for example. And I will speak a bit more about these two next projects. The first are two students who are Pila and Douglas, who decided to work on thinking what can international community do. One of the things is to prevent expulsions. So, more like things that actually are happening on the ground, and Britain and the international community can put pressure on Israel to stop that. We had a campaign, part of an international Save Masafar Yatta campaign, a community in South Hebron Hills, who is already been under some expulsions. We managed to have almost 10,000 letters sent to MPs, which was a very successful campaign. And at the same time, there was also an attempt, which is, I'm not sure where, it is still quite stuck, but a twinning of Masafar Yatta community with Kehila North London, which is a Jewish liberal community in North London. But even if it doesn't happen, we went there with Douglas and Rabbi Danny Rich, who is a patron of the Balfour Project. We spoke to the community and other communities as well. So, you know, we had this engagement with Jewish communities. So that was brilliant as well. And, you know, this also opened the Balfour Project to continue campaigning on other issues such as E1, the 6 Palestinian organizations, and we work with different organizations on those issues, and also expand the number of MPs who actually, you know, who care, but sometimes they are not in those circles. Let's go to the next slide. I don't know why I can't, maybe, yeah. Another brilliant campaign that we had was by 2 history students. One of them was PhD. Was as John explained, there's the pillar of advocacy and the pillar of education or history. So as historians, we already know what is done, what is offered in high schools to teach about Israel and Palestine. There's organizations like Solutions Not Sides. There's an organization like Parallel Histories, but none of them actually teach about what happened during late Ottoman and the change to British mandate in Palestine. So this is a source finding analysis workshop for history A-level students. Also, we're going to expand for GCSE next week, and it ran in 2 schools in London and in Leicester, if I remember correctly, and yeah, maybe not sorry, Lancaster. Okay, yeah, and this was such a successful project that next year we want to continue it. So students who would be interested in history rather than starting from scratch, we already have a tool. We already go to a teacher's training, history teacher's training in Manchester University around January or March. And we are going to teach those teachers how to run this project. So that's a brilliant project from this year that we're going to continue next year.
Thanks, Matan. So I think that's probably enough from our end in describing the fellowship program to you. So we want to use the rest of the time that we have here to have Q&A or discussion. So please